Hello, welcome to Group 9's Emerging Diseases Epidemiology Project presentation. We are part of Dr. Brundage's ENTO 423 class. We are Reagan Miller, Marissa Mitchell, Cheryl Richards, Jenna Harlan, and Victoria Jacobson. So our disease has been dubbed squiccridium. It is an incredibly deadly vector-borne disease. Our vector is Amblyomma maculatum, commonly known as the Gulf Coast tick. It's found primarily in the southern United States, as you can see here on the map, which is why it's called the Gulf Coast tick. It likes a hot and humid climate and lives primarily in tall grasses where it can attach itself onto many animals. The tick feeds on many different animals, 71 in total. The larvae and the nymphs prefer smaller birds and mammals, and the adults prefer larger mammals, although they have been known to also feed on squirrels, which will be important later. All these life stages can also feed on humans. So the life stages of our tick, here is Amblyomma maculatum. Of course, the female lays the eggs, which then hatch into a larvae and then grow into a nymphal stage and finally become the adult tick. So Amblyomma maculatum is known to spread quite a few vector-borne diseases such as rickettsiety, Parkeri, rickettsiosis. So it is already a medically important tick and has quite a lot of research concerning it. So now we're going to move on to talk about our host, which is of course the human. They've been proven to be extremely susceptible to this disease and has a very, very high mortality rate, basically 100%. Squiccridium affects all ages and sexes, although our younger and older patients have been known to succumb to the disease faster. Every patient basically presented with fever and general malaise. They weren't feeling well and decided to see what was going on. There was nothing really very severe that prompted them to go to the doctor. However, after the onset of the symptoms, it progressed pretty rapidly and led to eventual coma and death. Some of the symptoms included drooling, inflammation of the epiglottis, sore throat, dysphagia, and watery edema. Now our patients, Patricia and Frank Howard, they are a couple that traveled around a lot and brought back flying squirrels from Uganda that actually turned out to be the reservoir of squiccridium. Mackenzie Sutton was their pet sitter and initially spread the disease through her work as a pet sitter and wildlife rehabilitator. Eric and Ruth Martin were just a young couple that picked up the disease living in Tallahassee. Lauren and Cynthia Whitley were mother and daughter that traveled to Orlando to go to Disney World and got infected. Brianna Ewing was our only patient from South Carolina that got infected, and Derek Mathis was a hunter from Texas who got infected while out hunting. And Johnny was a homeless man from Atlanta, Georgia. We don't know how he got infected or how long the disease progressed because he was found deceased. So our geographic range, as you can see, pretty much matches the range of Amblyomma maculatum. It's basically centered around the Gulf Coast. Doesn't really have much spread. Our two patients from Utah picked up the disease in Tallahassee, or in Orlando actually. Our patient 0 is Mackenzie Sutton. She was a pet sitter and had basically daily interactions with many, many different kinds of animals. She worked for Patricia and Frank Howard and picked up the disease from the flying squirrels that they brought back from Uganda. And the squirrels infected Miss Sutton, who was then bit by ticks while she was out walking animals or releasing the wildlife that she rehabilitated. So the ticks that then bit her became the vector for this disease and spread it onto other animals and humans in the area. Now this is just the areas of exposure where our patients picked up the disease around the Orlando area, mostly trails and wildlife areas, although the homes of Patricia, Frank, and Mackenzie are also highlighted. So now we're going to talk about our reservoir, which is just our common squirrel. It ranges basically everywhere in the world, North and South America, Eurasia, and Africa. And they're active year-round and don't really have a time of the day where they're most active. This is the range for the eastern gray squirrel, which is the most common squirrel in our area. And as you can see, their range overlaps the range of Amblyomma maculatum. It covers the entire Gulf Coast, which makes it a perfect reservoir for squiccridium. So squirrels don't really interact with humans that much. They do inhabit many of the same areas as we can see here at Texas A&M with our giant squirrels, but they typically aren't aggressive and don't usually attack or bite humans. They can host and spread tick-borne diseases such as Lyme disease, encephalitis, and Rocky Mountain fever, but they're not a very common host for these diseases. Amblyomma maculatum does feed on squirrels, which is why they have become our reservoir. So now we're going to move on to talk about our disease agent. We have discovered a new species of Clostridium, which is a bacterium. Its genome size is roughly 5.31 megabases. It is a rod-shaped bacterium. So we discovered this to be an unknown species of Clostridium through the test results that were given to us and all the other data that we acquired through Dr. Brundage. So squiccridium, our disease, it is of course a tick-borne disease, as Amblyomma maculatum is our vector. It's caused by a bacterium of the Clostridium genus. There have been no survivors so far and hundreds of patients. It has become a very difficult disease to treat, and physicians and the healthcare providers that are trying to combat this disease have complained a lot about its aggressiveness and fatality. Of course, I've already spoken about the symptoms, but they are all very severe and have led to death in every single case. So now we're going to talk about our control plan, which includes all the steps we're going to take to hopefully eradicate squiccridium. From pathogen to reservoir, we are going to vaccinate our reservoir, the squirrel, introduce immune reservoirs to breed with the squirrels, and dispose of diseased and deceased squirrels. From reservoir to vector, we will use pesticides and acaricides to eradicate most of the ticks. We're going to attract the ticks with hexanes and then use acaricides on them. And we're going to release birds that eat the ticks to kind of introduce natural tick management. And then from vector to host, we're going to encourage vaccination of humans, really introduce a large awareness campaign to show people that this is a very serious and very real disease, and then also encourage the use of insect repellent. So again, to break the pathogen to reservoir part of the cycle, we're going to distribute vaccine for the squirrels, introduce immune individuals, and dispose of the deceased and diseased. So our detailed approach is going to involve developing and distributing an attenuated vaccine for the squirrels. We will develop it and distribute them to wildlife centers and veterinarians that will then put these vaccinations out into areas of high squirrel density. The squirrels will then hopefully eat the vaccine because it's going to be disguised as food that squirrels typically eat, such as nuts and seeds, and then the attenuated Clostridium will attack the living Clostridium in the palatine tonsils of the squirrels and introduce immunity. Another way we're going to introduce immunity is by taking a subset of the population of the squirrels in South Carolina, Texas, Florida, and Georgia, by trapping them by trained professionals, and then veterinarians will administer the vaccines. So the squirrels, we know that some of the squirrels are really getting the vaccine, and we're going to wait to see if they have picked up the immunity from the vaccine, and then they will be released into their natural habitat to interbreed with other squirrels to spread the immunity to the entire squirrel population. Lastly, we will dispose of deceased and diseased squirrels by burning the deceased ones and then sending the deceased ones to centers where they can be humanely euthanized. So to break the reservoir to vector part of the cycle, we're going to use acaricides for Amblyomma maculatum, attract ticks with hexanes, and disperse birds that can eat the ticks. So the acaricides that we're going to use are going to be sprayed far away from anywhere that humans dwell or frequent. So we received quite a few complaints from people worrying the pesticides are going to harm them. So the only places we're going to spray are far away from humans where there are high tick population densities. While we're spraying far away from humans, we need to attack the ticks that are living close to humans. So we'll be using hexanes to attract them and then putting acaricides in conjunction with these hexanes, so when the ticks do get attracted to them, they then pick up the acaricides and will die. So we're going to confine these places of pesticides by putting a mesh-topped box over them so the ticks can get through, but local wildlife won't be hurt by getting into the pesticides. And we're going to place quite a few signs and warnings around the areas that we've placed the acaricides so people know not to go near the boxes. While these hexanes are going to only attract female ticks to the sites of acaricides, we don't think this is going to be a big problem, as we do have two other ways that we're going to manage the tick population. Our last way to manage the ticks is going to be to release natural predators of ticks, such as chickens and guinea fowl. They've been known to eat ticks and really decimate tick populations, so they will be used to manage the ticks in a more natural and chemical-free way to kind of appease the public, as we won't need to spray as many pesticides as we would if we didn't use these fowl. So of course chickens are very common in North America. However, guinea fowl are endemic to Africa and are not very popular here. However, they are used quite commonly on farms to control ticks, so we don't really worry about them becoming an invasive species, and we do believe their benefits will outweigh any of the negatives that come with releasing them to the wild. Lastly, to break the vector-to-host part of the cycle, we will be creating a human vaccine, increasing awareness of the disease, and letting people know how to protect themselves from the ticks. The vaccine is going to be an optional part of our campaign, as there's no human-to-human risk of spreading the disease. However, it is highly recommended, as the disease is very deadly, and getting the vaccine will protect against risk of infection. So the vaccines will be available at local pharmacies for only around $30 to $40, just to offset costs of developing the vaccine. The awareness part is really our cornerstone of the campaign. If people know what to look for and know about the disease, it will really help in controlling the spread of squiccridium. So to accomplish this, we're going to reach out to media across South Carolina, Texas, Florida, and Georgia, where the largest outbreaks have been documented, and information regarding the transmission of the disease, dangers which honestly just lead to death, and the prevention tactics will be shared with health departments and news agencies. So we are going to identify Amblyomma maculatum as our vector, so people can identify the tick and know what to look out for, and then we will follow up with signs and symptoms of the disease so people can identify if they do have squiccridium. We'll use radio announcements, commercials, and ads in newspapers to get the word out about the disease and have information listing all the things that we have included in our PSAs. Posters will also be posted in areas where transmission is more likely to occur, such as places near parks and trails, places with high tick densities, basically. Safety around wildlife information will also be distributed, and local governments will be informed of all the risks and the necessary steps to take to protect their citizens from the disease. To decrease tick exposure, we're going to recommend personal protection against ticks, such as wearing bug spray that contains DEET when going out, basically outside to parks or heavily forested areas. Pet owners should also check their animals for ticks and consult their veterinarian about the best way to control ticks. And then for anyone that enjoys hiking, we recommend long pants, long sleeves, and rolling their socks over their pants, wearing boots, and to always check for ticks when you're coming back from being outside. So, just to wrap up, squiccridium is an incredibly deadly disease with no known survivors, and we must control the population of Amblyomma maculatum and our reservoir, the squirrel, to hopefully eradicate this disease and stop anyone else from succumbing to it.